There we go. Why is it doing that? There we go. No. We got audio. We're good. That's shelving. And I have to cover this with that the laser cover for the laser printer. Otherwise the cat eats tries to dig into what's behind there. He's not eating it, of course. He's trying to dig into it. Doing okay. Yeah, I chopped my hair off. I got so sick of it. Now that I figured out a way to cut my own hair, because the whole point of getting the hair long was to avoid haircuts, and now I can keep it not long and still avoid haircuts. Now, let me get this chat window popped out here. Come on, come on. There it goes. Why won't you move? There we go. No, I'm not going to Murph. I couldn't afford that. Way, way too expensive. I got a set of wall clippers with the little attachments, and I used the 2.5 inch for here, and I used the 1/2 inch for the sides, and it worked. It's not too bad. Except that now I got these parts here that want to go. Really annoying. Okay, yeah, it looks okay. Haven't had a chance to play with the palette yet because I gotta finish a few rockets to get them. Oh my god! Get them done so I can get them listed for sale. I made some corrections from some flying I did. That's where first party flying is important because I'll notice things immediately. Like I didn't like the way the motor mounts fit inside the models. The way certain parts were a little too thin, and the way the heat affected it. So I rebuilt the motor mounts. So now they are they're just ribs all the way up. So the walls are no longer tenuous. By having the conical shape, for whatever reason the walls weren't very well reinforced. Well, in worst case scenario, I can grow it back. But yeah, if I can keep it short, short's more comfortable. Except I got these two little calyx here that like to go. I doubled the number of ribs. I doubled the number of shock cord mount holes. And I also added this section here, this cylindrical section at the top here. And the reason for that is so that when you look inside, there's no gap. You can see inside there. There we go. How it's a nice flush fit inside of there. And because this has 3 layers, the heat can only beat on this surface. When the ejection charge gets trapped inside there, it'll just beat this surface without compromising the integrity of this surface here. So much, much more resilient. Now a little heavier, but in reality for this scale of rocket, that mass is irrelevant difference. It's not going to hurt nothing. And so I completely redesigned all of the motor mounts. Right now I'm going to stick with the 60mm class, and I'll do the rest of them later. But that came out really good. And it's kind of weird, counterintuitive, but so I have 3 sizes. Now that is, well, 4 sizes. That was 13mm, but there's 18mm, there's 24mm, and there's 29mm. And what's weird, I sold a couple. The what's weird is that the smaller you get, the heavier it gets. So 12 grams, 11 grams, 10 grams. It's kind of weird, but when you think about it, it makes sense. There's less plastic here. You know, you can see there's all this extra plastic. So the smaller the motor, the heavier it gets. I could go with less ribs for the smaller motor, but I like how really rigid this is. Like this is crazy strong. I like how strong that is. So I'm going to stick with this design. Also, by having an open rib structure, all the walls are vertical, so they're much stronger. But also, you now have a place to stick your fingers and turn to screw the motor mount in or out of the rocket. So that works a lot better. I'm pleased with that. And I've worked on 2 camera boosters. Haven't figured out which one's superior. I know one looks better. We'll see whether it's superior or not. But so one of the nice things about 3D printing is that I can put a custom mount in here. That's not quite finished. This one stays in vase mode, which is pretty hard to do. It kind of screws up this back surface here, but that doesn't really matter since that's just the back wall where the camera's going to sit. But that's the 60mm booster. This is Filamentum's new, I think, Stardust. It doesn't say on the roll. It's like a champagne color with a gold glitter inside. It's good, strong plastic. But the one thing I didn't like was how squishy it was between the ribs. I mean, technically that's fine, but I think I want to go for durability first before I go for performance. So I redid the Lodestar for the new one, and all of the parts have 16 ribs instead of 8 ribs. And so the result is I can take any part of this rocket now and squeeze it as hard as I want, and I cannot break. I cannot crush the tube. It also dawned on me that the transition here would allow me, this is a transition that goes from a smaller tube to a larger tube, but this transition allows me to hide more of the camera and hold the camera more securely. This is not vase mode, this part here. And right now this part here is about 42 grams. I do have a sliced version that's 31 grams. We'll see how strong that is when I slice it. It's got built-in hard points for hooking rubber bands onto. So if you had a rubber band, you could hook it onto I don't actually have a rubber band handy, but you could hook it onto this hard point and it'll actually stay put. There we go. That's a hard point where a rubber band could attach to hold the camera in. And then there's a cavity inside here, and that cavity partially encases the camera so it can't move forward or backwards. So the G-load of the rocket thrusting can't pull the camera out of the casing. But I got these itty bitty little cameras. This is actually a knockoff. It's a fake. This camera is the SQ11. It's a 1080p camera. This is not. This is VGA. This is 640 by 480. But it's actually decent video. It's not horrible. It's not an instant on camera. You have to press and hold till the light comes on. Then you press it again and you see the light blink 4 times and you know it's recording. I wish there was a way I can get that light to stay on so it keep blinking. I don't care about the battery draw, but I want to know the camera's recording before I fly. But, you know, beggars and choosers. You can get these cameras for like $7 or $8. So the point of this is to allow people to fly a video camera rocket really, really cheap. You know, even the cheap little camera that SD sells is $50. So this, you can get these for $10 on Amazon even. Or by 12 or 14 bucks on Amazon, 7 or 8 bucks from China. But this camera just, this is first print. I love the fact that when you do this enough, you get closer and closer to first iteration. There's still some changes I want to make. I'll show you in a second. Actually, let me but there's the booster. I still have to print the tail cone, which is printing right now. But let's take this apart so I can show it to you easier. And using quality plastic makes such a big difference. Oh man, the difference quality plastic makes. Hello, Colin. So this is the camera bay. It came out really nice. There's 5% infill, and then at 2 points here, here, and here, I jack it up to 30% temporarily, just to have support for these walls to finish printing, because that wall is near horizontal, and it worked. It came out very nicely. I'm very pleased with that. But here's the cool part. First print of this part, I did not have to print a second iteration, and it just slots right in there just like that. Like a glove. That came out so good. For some reason this does this. I'm not sure why. I don't see a reason for it to do that. But something else I might do is extend this wall down here all the way up with a slot in the middle, so that this camera is fully encased on all sides. That'll give a really rigid attachment point in there. I think that would, if I can manage to figure out how to make that work. But that would be nice. Now what you would do is you would just take a rubber band over this one and over this one, and the rubber band would hold it in there and keep it from coming out. So the changes I have to make on this one here, you can see the this one here is a little too low, because the back half of the rubber band will actually be off the back of the camera here, and this one here is just about right. Although I want to lower it as well so that the rubber band doesn't go over top of the buttons. Right now the rubber band will pass over top of the buttons. Huh? Military? No. Well, when you're using clippers, you know how you can get yes, it'll video while coming down. I'll get into that in a moment too. You know how you get the clippers and you have the little attachments that go on the clippers to control the length of the cut? So I just use the 2.5-inch clippers to do everything, and then I use the 1/2-inch clippers just on the side, so that I get that, you know, where it's slightly different here than here. Except I found out I still have calyx, because these two parts of my head right here want to do this. I should make them into horns or something. But yeah, it's much more comfortable having a short haircut. I found a neat little trick, a little sidestep off topic. The problem with my eyes that's permanent and it's never going to go away. Yay! And the medicine that works that I can't keep using because it'll make me blind. Well, I found a different medicine that kind of helps. It happened by accident, and then I started thinking. I was like, wait a minute. He said it's inflammation. So would an anti-inflammatory work? And the answer is yes. Well, the hair will grow back. Well, if you have natural baldness, that has nothing to do with a haircut. But yeah, I'll probably end up going bald here in the middle. You can see it's getting thin there. Who cares? I found out that Advil helps with my eyes. It doesn't make it go away, it doesn't make it better, but it stops it from getting so bad that it actually hurts. I have to be careful because you don't want to take Advil long term, but apparently, you know, like for example, I took Advil for a headache, you know, like 4 days ago, and it's still working. So I might be able to get down to once a week and be okay. Also, I found out aspirin is also an NSAID like Advil, and low dose aspirin is safe to take every day. So I bought a bottle of chewable, you know, 81 milligram low dose aspirin, and I'll take just one a day, and hopefully that'll keep the inflammation in the eyes okay. But this turned out really nice. The other advantage of the knockoff camera is that it's 10 grams. It's half the weight of the real camera. And in fact, I could remove the shell of the camera and make it even lighter. I'll have to see how effective that is, if it's practical to do that long term. But I'd also like to make an ultra light camera kit. So something that's not 3D printed. Maybe I'll try to 3D print it if I can. But I'd like to make something 24mm size. It takes a 13mm motor, because this camera is light enough to fly on something like that. And then what I might do is I might transition from, the 24mm size to this size directly into a nose cone. Just keep the mass down. I want to try to get something under 100 grams, wet, so that I can, fly on like A10 3Ts or something like that, or even do a multi-stage model. So this is looking pretty good. So I got 2 models to work with. Now, the camera records as long as the battery is running. So that battery has, more than enough capacity to run for the entire flight up and down. Now, the way you rig the camera has a pretty big impact on what kind of video you get. Man, this is so well built now. And I got it to line up perfectly, so it lines up with the 2 fins, so you get that nice down the tube look. This Lodestar is my favorite design so far. It's my own original design, and it just really came out nice. And strong. So the way this will work is the nose cone will come off. The nose cone will be attached to the parachute and the shroud lines. But the way this will work is there'll be two shock cords on this rocket. One shock cord will be attached to the back of the rocket here. I might even put a hole in the fin and attach the shock cord right there. And then the other shock cord will be attached inside the rocket. So this rocket will come down under 2 parachutes. One attached here and one attached here. The idea is to make the rocket come down horizontally like this, because when you have the camera inside the rocket, the camera is looking down the length of the rocket, because it's going to get your cool lift off, the flame and launch pad and all that stuff. The problem is if you come down under a parachute like this, what are you getting a picture of? Grass, 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 grass. You're just getting the grass directly below the rocket. If you're lucky and the rocket passes over top of something, you'll get something interesting in the video. No, I have not used lightweight PLA. I don't think that'll work very well on a rocket. Yeah, standard PLA is going to be pretty heavy for an airplane. It can work, but it's going to be a pretty high wing loading. The foaming PLA, the lightweight PLA, works for airplanes, but it might not work for rockets. And that's because the rocket is undergoing compression forces when it thrusts. So basically the entire rocket is trying to crush itself like this. Regular plastic, perfectly adequate for those kind of stresses. Any imperfections, however, could cause the model to kink. And once the model kinks, with 100 G's of acceleration behind it, that's it. It's gone. That's what we call a RUD, or a re-kitting. Today we're playing with putting a micro camera, an itty-bitty little $10 camera, and I 3D printed a mount that fits it perfectly. First try. Now this one works a little bit differently, because this one has a straight tube, not a transition. So I couldn't embed the camera as far into the rocket as I want. So as you can see, the mount sticks out quite a bit further. But same deal, and again, this is first print, so this came out nice. The camera fits in there like that. There's a few changes I want to make. The attachment points, the shaping, but otherwise that came out very nice. I'm pleased with that. This one, I want to try to angle it down a little more, because you only see the ends of the fins. You don't see the entire tube, which means you're not going to see the flame and the liftoff, and that's important. That's something that people are going to want to see. So I've got to try to angle this more down. The problem is angling it more down is it's going to make vase mode hard. So I might have to give up vase mode for this section of the rocket. It was an experiment to see if I could stay in vase mode for the whole thing. And I had to angle it like that in order to have enough of an angle here for this to be able to successfully print. So we'll play with that. I also have to weigh these. I gotta see which of these, like this rocket is bigger, but it might actually be lighter than this rocket. Oh yeah, I think this rocket is heavier. Huh. I would not have guessed that at first. So this rocket is much tougher, much more durable, but it's also heavier. So yeah, I'll have to play around with that. The problem is the techniques to make things lighter make them weaker. The flight stresses that an airplane undergoes are actually quite a bit less than the flight stresses that a rocket undergoes. Well, they're also different. An airplane needs to be strong in all directions, but it doesn't have to be as strong. Because an airplane, you know, it can maneuver left, right, up, down, positive and negative G's. A rocket, most of the flight stress is straight up. So most of the flight stress is in compression, trying to compress the rocket. So there are things you can do that you can get away with. I wonder if I printed this. I don't have any extreme angles. See, the problem is you also have diminishing returns. I can make it lighter, but that's going to take longer to print. And is it worth the longer print time to save, 20% of the mass of the rocket? I don't know. I'll have to play with that. Because if I printed this with a 0.3 millimeter nozzle, I would lower the mass of the entire rocket by 25%. Because this is single extrusion vase mode, changing the nozzle width has a direct linear impact on the mass of the rocket. So a 0.8 millimeter nozzle would be double the weight for the exact same rocket. And a 0.2 millimeter nozzle would be half the weight for the exact same rocket. But the problem is making the wall thinner makes the wall weaker. Not so much for... Oh yeah, rocketry is definitely a thing in the UK. Here's the weird thing. I could probably print this entire rocket with a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, and it would probably work, and be half the weight, which would be pretty cool. The problem is not flight stresses. The 0.2 millimeter wall thickness would be just fine for flight stresses. That wouldn't be an issue. The problem is, two, is handling stresses. That's one of the reasons why I'm making this bird with 16 ribs, is that you can't really damage this unless you do it purposely. You'd have to purposely abuse this rocket to damage it. Handling it. Just because it's so freaking strong. You'd have a really hard time breaking it. But there's other flight stresses. So not flight stresses. There's other stresses the rocket experiences. And one of those primary stresses is heat. When the ejection charge fires, there's a motor mount in here. It has to handle the heat of the motor. Now that's no big deal because we're using a sleeved motor mount. So this tube becomes part of the motor mount. So I would use about that much tube. And the max height, how much money do you have? That's the max height of a rocket, is how much money do you have. So I could put a 29 millimeter motor in this thing. And in theory, I can probably put a 38 millimeter motor in this thing. And I could probably punt this to 7,000 or 8,000 feet without trying very hard. You'll never see it again. It's gone. You will never see it again. It's gonna land in the next state. So here's the thing. Now, of course, you can go higher by making it lighter. So, for example, if you stuffed if I made this entire rocket this size, without this transition going to a larger tube, if I just made 2 more of these with a nose cone this side, which I might actually do, You could put a G12 in here and probably hit 5,000 or 6,000 feet without a problem. And that would only cost you like $40. It wouldn't be that bad. Some of the ultra high performance rockets are actually made out of carbon fiber. They're laid up in Kevlar and carbon fiber, and but that's because they're. Oh, I thought it was a cracked screen. It was just filament. But that's because they're going, Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4. There's even one that just went Mach 5, Mach 5.2. And at that point, atmospheric heating becomes an issue. Like, they actually melted the nose cone. The resin impregnated nose cone actually softened, and when it came back, it was all rippled and compressed because it got heated up and got soft. I actually gave them a suggestion that they might actually use. I said, well, put a water bottle inside the nose cone and freeze it. So have a bladder inside the nose cone. So have a watertight section inside the nose cone here. Fill it with water and freeze it. Get it to -20, and then have an electric cooler that you bring to the field with you that keeps it, at -4 degrees. The ice will last long enough to act as a giant heat sink for the nose cone and might be enough to keep it from melting. Maybe. Especially if they put some copper fingers, ribs, in the nose cone so the copper can transfer the heat from the heat from the external heating to the ice core. It'll actually be interesting to see how much of it melts by the time it's done flying, to see how many joules of energy you're actually collecting in that atmospheric heating. That'd be a fascinating experiment. But they might actually try that. And so that's my idea that might go into a space rocket. But if I made I might do that tonight because I think that would be fun. If I got rid of these launch lugs and used a tower or rail buttons, and I made the entire rocket this size, I forget how big this is, 47 millimeters or something like that. But if I made the whole rocket that size, and so this all was shrunk down to this scale, that would probably get, you could probably crack 10,000 feet for under $100. The problem is getting it back. If you don't care, if you just want to hit 10,000 feet and not be able to prove it and be able to say, yep, well, by the simulator, that hit 10,000 feet, then you could just do that. You could just make a minimum diameter, 29, take a tube like this. You take a real heavy wall tube like this, and you put just, 3 simple fins and a nose cone on this thing, and then you just punt this bitch on the largest motor you can squeeze inside of there. Actually, it might be too light. You might have to add mass. There is such a thing as optimal mass. A rocket can actually be too light for that kind of a mission profile. So how do I describe this? You're putting a certain amount of energy into the liftoff. That's your propellant. But you're also going to experience a retraction of that energy via gravity, pulling the rocket down, and also atmospheric drag, slowing the rocket down. Inertia overcomes drag. So a lightweight object, well, for example, if you take a feather and a hammer and you drop them on the moon, they both fall at the exact same speed and they both hit the ground at the exact same time. So if you take literally you take a hammer and you take a feather, they will, hey 3D Medic, they will both fall at the exact same speed because gravity acts on everything equally. It doesn't care if it's this big, it doesn't care if it's this big. And it doesn't care if it's this heavy or this heavy. Gravity is going to pull them toward the Earth at 32 feet per second, regardless of how big they are. Nothing matters. It's going to fall at the same speed. Yet, here on Earth, there's no question, if I drop these two objects, this one's hitting the ground first. And that's because we have an additional force at play. We have something called atmospheric drag. The air is going to resist these two objects flowing through them. And the surface area of the object and the mass of the object come into play. Doing pretty good, David. come into play when you have atmosphere involved. So the minimum diameter rocket is skinnier, so less atmospheric drag that way. But also the mass of the rocket becomes important. If the rocket is too light, the atmospheric drag is going to slow the rocket down faster because it's going to be able to impart more energy per unit mass of the rocket. So in rocketry, we actually have a concept called optimal mass. Like some of these high-performance rockets, you actually have to make them heavier. You have to add mass so that the energy transfer from the motor to the rocket, which is now converted to inertia or potential energy, can punch through as much of the air as possible, where a lighter rocket would slow down faster. Yeah, based on the time, it's probably a time thing. What time is it in the UK right now? We're around dinner time? Or is it morning? Wait a minute. You're ahead. So it's dinner time where you are? Yeah, dinner time. That's why. So people on the East Coast haven't gotten off work yet, for example. But you guys in the UK, you've gotten off work because that's at 5 o'clock. So you're now home to be available on the internet. While people in, say, Egypt or Ukraine, they're going to be in bed because it's going to be, 10, 11 o'clock at night. So you need frontal area, that means how big is the rocket, and you also need optimal mass for maximum altitude. So if you took a tube like this and you put, 3 fins on it, 3 minimal optimal fins, a nice heavy nose cone, you can go very, very high on a relatively inexpensive motor. Even a motor like a, what would be a good motor for some altitude here? Actually, E9. E9 would be a pretty decent motor for getting some altitude if the rocket was light enough, because it's a low thrust motor. E9.0 to an E9.8, 2-stage would get you really high, probably 3,000 or 4,000 feet if you designed it right and used a piston. The problem is getting it back. So what's interesting is that you've got people who can fly little Estes rockets this size, and they will actually land 5 times further away from the pad than this same rocket that is this big around with a motor 100 times larger. The reason has to do with recovery. So when the rocket flies up into the air, it's got to pop the nose cone off, and then a parachute comes out from inside. That parachute then brings the rocket back to the ground safely, so that it doesn't damage itself and you can fly it again. So this rocket here might go, 1,100 feet. On like you stick a D20 in there, it'd probably go higher than 1,100 feet, but put a C65 in there, you're going to get about 1,000 feet up, 800 to 1,000 feet on a rocket this size. So now you have a 12-inch parachute or a 9-inch parachute, and you are descending at 20 feet per second from 1,000 feet. Well, now you're descending slow enough that wind is going to push your rocket sideways. Not the wind pushing on the rocket, that's not that much wind, but that parachute hanging above the rocket is going to make the rocket drift. Now, a big rocket, so this same rocket, but 7-8 feet tall, 5 inches in diameter, instead of weighing 80 grams, it's going to weigh 8 kilos, 8,000 grams. That rocket lands 50 feet away from the pad. How? That's because the larger rockets use something called dual deploy. So they will have 2 charges inside the rocket. So the rocket will actually separate into 3 pieces. It will separate here, and it will also separate here. So what might happen is this rocket might separate here and here into 3 pieces like this, all attached with a shock cord, and then no parachute, or a very, very tiny parachute. And so this assembly of parts will just come down with no recovery system. It will just be falling ballistically to the ground. But because it's separated into parts, it's not going to fall ballistically like this. It's going to come down sideways. So the drift is going to be very, very minimal because there's just not much for the air to push against. And inside, there's going to be a pyro charge or a chute release. I actually have one of those. And an altimeter. So for pyro, let's call it some sort of release mechanism and an altimeter. And that altimeter is a little computer that has a barometric sensor that reads pressure. And so based on launch, so the altitude they measure is AGL, above ground level. So they're not measuring your absolute altitude. They're measuring your altitude relative to when you turned it on. So ground level, where you launched, and then how far up. To get actual altitude, you take the altimeter reading and add your ground altitude. So here I would add, like, around here, you're at between 6,200 and 6,800 feet, depending on where you are. So let's call it 6,500 feet. So if the rocket goes 1,000 feet, that's 7,500 feet above sea level, but only 1,000 feet above where I launched from. So inside, there's a little tiny computer with a barometric sensor that's figuring out your altitude. And you program that little computer with how high do you want to be when you deploy the parachute. So this rocket might go 5, 6, 7,000 feet up, in which case, go find it in Arizona. But with dual deploy, I don't deploy a parachute. I just separate the rocket into two parts. A shock cord attaches them. In my case, the parachute would actually be out, but it would be wrapped up tight. So it wouldn't open into a parachute. So you just have this rocket with this bundled up parachute in the middle, and it would just fall straight down. And I would program a release or fire altitude of, say, 400 feet. So now, even though this rocket went 6,000 feet up, it's going to plummet straight down because there's no parachute. It's going to come down sideways. You don't want it to do this. And then that little computer inside is going to go, okay, I'm at 5,000 feet, don't do anything. I'm at 3,000 feet, don't do anything. I'm at 1,000 feet, ooh, I'm getting close. And then when that altimeter, that little computer says, oh, there's 400 feet, then it releases the parachute or fires the pyro charge to fire off the parachute. And so my big, heavy rocket that went 10 times higher than your rocket releases its parachute at 400 feet. And it's also a heavier rocket, so it's not going to drift that far at 400 feet. And so my rocket lands right here on the field. While the little rocket, the guy's still out there chasing it. Because it deployed its little parachute at 1,100 feet, and so it went bye-bye. So that's how we get these back. Now the problem is, you need space for that. You need space to put that second parachute or that pyro release or that chute release. So for example, I don't know if my chute release would fit inside of here. I'll have to check. You might need something this big for the chute release. I don't know how big I have the chute release, but I haven't done anything with it yet. I haven't seen how tight a space I can fit it in. So this might be too small. This is definitely big enough. So the question is, how small can I make it and still fit the chute release? If I could fit it in something like this, well then I got a shot. I can deploy the recovery system without opening the parachute. So basically your parachute would be... Why does that keep blinking? It's weird. So here's your parachute. And what you would do is you would wrap your parachute up real tight. So you'd have your parachute wrapped up tight like this, so it doesn't open up. And there'd be a little electronic gizmo attached to the parachute here. And when that electronic gizmo has a rubber band and a pin. And when the altimeter reaches the right altitude, that pin gets pulled, releasing the parachute and allowing the parachute to open. That's how chute release work. A dual deploy altimeter would basically work. This would be inside of some kind of recovery bag or a small section of body tube. So like I said, for example, you might have a rocket like this where the first pyro charge just separates the two parts. And then inside here, you'll have two spaces. So you have this space in here, and then you have a little space in here, which might be something like this. And inside of that, you'd have this parachute stuffed in there. So when the first ejection charge fires, it's not going to release this parachute because it's not firing into here. It's firing into the main body, which just blows the rocket apart. And then inside of here, I'd have a little pyro charge inside. So this tube would only be about that big for this particular rocket. And then inside of here would be a little black powder charge connected to an igniter, or a starter, as they like to call them now. And when the little flight computer says, okay, I'm at the right altitude, the battery power gets applied to the starter, which ignites the black powder, which, blows out the parachute and allows the rocket to recover without smashing into the ground. So that's how you would have to do it if you wanted to fly it and get it back, or have any reasonable chance of getting it back. Now, as soon as you want to go above 10,000 feet, it gets a little harder, because now the motors you need to use to go that high are bigger and more expensive. Now you're talking a few $100 per flight. If you want to fly like a J or a K, something that'll let you hit 15, 16, 17,000 feet, you're looking at, $150 to $200 for one flight. So the cost goes up pretty quickly at that point. But using a chute release and a smaller rocket, you can get some pretty impressive altitude without spending a lot of money. We're talking, let's see what's available. Let's see what we have here. Let me switch over to second screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at. We're just seeing what Apogee has for 29mm single use. Since we're doing an ultra high performance model, you don't want to use a reloadable motor, because then you'll lose the expensive motor hardware if you lose the rocket. And we want to try to minimize our losses here. Why isn't this working? Why is it connecting to Google? It's weird. Okay. Let's see. E24, F20, F23. Here's the motor list. What we want is the letter to be as big as we can get it, and the number to be as small as we can get it. So, do I have my... Yeah, I do have that up there. So, in terms of rocket propellant, you can think of the letters like this. A B is twice as powerful as an A, and a C is twice as powerful as a B. So each time you increase the letter size, you're doubling your available impulse. Now, just like electricity, you have energy and power. So the letter is your energy. That's how much energy you have. The number is your power. Same amount of energy, different amount of power. Remember, if I want to push you, I can push you by taking my finger, putting it against your chest, and then just gently pushing harder and harder until you start to move, and then I can just push you backwards like that. Okay? Or I can take my fist and use the exact same amount of overall energy, but in a much shorter time period, and give you a pop like that. So this would be high power, and this would be low power, same overall energy. So the smaller number means lower thrust for a longer period of time. Larger number means a whole lot more thrust, but a very short period of time. So for example, a D12 is a D-class engine that burns for 2 seconds, while a D20 is the same class engine, but it only burns for 1 second. So twice the power, half the time. So what we want is as much power as we can get, as much energy as we can get, with as little power as we can get. So we want this number to be as big as we can get it, and the other number, so like this here is a G125. So that's a G amount of impulse, so 125, I'm guessing this is newtons? Is that newtons? Let's see here. Total impulse, newtons, yes. So you can think of it like this. So this number here, the 125, that's your newtons. That's your total energy. While this here is your power. So you can see these motors have a very similar amount of energy. 124 and 114. 125 and 114. But this motor has less than half the thrust, the maximum thrust. So this motor is going to be a much longer burn. You can see that difference here. 3.1 second burn time or a 0.9 second burn time. So this motor is going to give you a much larger kick in the boot, but it ain't going to be anything after that. You know, once you got your kick, that's it, you're done. This motor is going to give you a much smaller kick in the boot, but it's going to give it to you for over 3 times longer. And so what we want is this number to be as high as possible and this number to be as high as possible, while this number is as low as possible. Because this is our total energy, this is our power, and this is how long we get that power. See this one here? These seem like similar motors, G40, G38. But you notice there's a big energy difference here. Similar kick in the butt, much bigger difference in energy, a full second less burn time. Since we're going for maximum altitude, heck, if we can fit a... is that 29 millimeter? Ooh, see, here's the difference. So these two motors are actually a pretty good comparison for what I'm talking about. This is an H13, this is an H182. So these are high power motors, so you would need to have certification for high power to fly these. 218 newtons, 211 newtons. So basically the same pool of energy. But look at the difference in power. This motor has power of 192, while this motor only has power of 43. But it's the same amount of energy. So if it's less power, same amount of energy, look what that does to burn time. So this motor takes this 218 newtons of energy and burns it up in 1.2 seconds, while this motor takes that same, roughly, 211.2 newtons of energy, but expends it over 15 seconds. This is going to go very, very high. Let's switch back to this. So definitely want to use the H13. So if you were to take a rocket like this, especially if we were to get rid of this section and make it thin like this, and put an H13 in here, it's going to go very, very, very high. Oh my God, how high would that go? I would have to simulate it to even guess, but I would guess you might be able to hit 12, 13, 14,000 feet with that high. In fact, what available delays are there for that motor? It's a plugged motor, okay. So that motor actually has no ejection charge, which creates a unique problem all its own. Very nice. The first layer came out dirty as hell, but there's my tail cone for this rocket. There we go. This rocket is ready to fly. Well, the plastic parts are ready to fly. There's my little boat tail. Let's print out a 24. you. Get rid of you. So to maximize the altitude we're going to get, well, we want that long burn motor. We want that 15 seconds of burn time. That's going to get us very, very high. You actually run into multiple problems. So first, it's a plugged motor. That means flight computer is mandatory, because you now no longer have an ejection charge to separate the rocket into two parts. And that also means you can't use a chute release, because you still need some sort of pyro charge to release the rocket in half to get the parachute out before the chute release can do anything. Which means you're going to need a flight computer with a pyro charge, which means you might as well use a dual deploy flight computer. So the trick is going to be finding a flight computer that will fit inside of a model that small. So you're probably going to want to fly something like this, with a larger section to be able to fit all that stuff into it. Because the motor is going to take up most of this. The motor is probably going to come up to here from the end. That's going to be a big motor. Also, you're definitely going to want that cardboard sleeve inside of here, because for 15 seconds that motor is going to be burning, which means there's going to be a lot of heating going on. So I would actually have to test that. I'd have to see how hot does that motor get, put a heater inside of here, and see if it can handle 15 seconds of that. That would actually be interesting. Could it handle 15 seconds? I know 6 or 7 seconds, no problem. But once you start getting above 10 seconds, you have to worry about the plastic heating up. If that plastic gets too soft, you're going to have a bad day. Well, your rocket's going to have a bad day, and everybody watching your rocket's going to have a great day watching you skyrate with pieces all over the sky. But then you need a flight computer, because you're going to have to deploy that parachute. And also deploy, you have to break the rocket. So for that rocket, I would actually have this rocket be 2 sections. You see how this section comes off like that? I would also have this section also have a coupler and slide off. The sole purpose of that being to break the rocket, to separate the rocket into 2 parts so that they come down non-ballistically. Because if you don't, the rocket's going to try to come down like this at full speed. That would be bad. Making sure there's print starting. And that looks good. I'm okay with that. So, and then inside of here, you'd have a split bay. So probably actually inside this coupler right here would be where the flight computer would go. And there'd be 2 pyro charges, one here and one here. Yeah, confetti would be fun. The problem is, could you see the confetti? The rocket would have to be pretty low for you to see that. I have another idea for that, though. So you'd have a pyro charge here that would break the rocket in 2, and a pyro charge here that would blow the nose cone off and release the parachute. So the altimeter, the flight computer, would be looking for 2 altitudes. First would be apogee, highest point the rocket reaches. When the rocket gets to horizontal, pop the main charge, because that's the highest you're going to get. And so the rocket would split in 2. Once the rocket splits in 2, it's no longer going to come down ballistically. It'll just fall like a rock. And when you hit your deployment altitude, it'll fire the second pyro charge, which will pop off the nose cone and release the parachute. That's how you do that. You could, theoretically, do that in a rocket this size. They do have flight computers that small. And it should fit inside of here. That should not be a problem. What I'll probably do is make this a little bit longer and this a little bit shorter, or just leave it the same. But make this a little bit longer, and I would make this my AV bay. This section here would be my avionics bay. And yeah, that's probably how I would do that. And then there would be a small pyro cup on each end of this. The one would be for breaking the rocket in half, and the other one would be for deploying the parachute. And I could probably even leave the camera in there. And now see, here's the problem with a camera rocket. With a camera rocket, dual deploy doesn't work. Okay, it works, but you kind of ruin the video. Because when this rocket breaks in half and it's just plummeting, well, you're going to have this camera on board the rocket, and this camera is going to be doing this. Because this rocket's going to be fluttering all over the place. So this entire video is going to be useless. It's not going to do anything for you. Until the parachute deploys, which it's going to do at 400 feet, which you could get a better video just by using this with a D20. So there's the catch-22 with high altitude, is that if you want video from high altitude, you need to deploy the parachutes at high altitude. The problem is, if you deploy the parachutes at high altitude, good luck getting it back. You're not going to get your video back. So it's kind of a catch-22. You got to figure out how to do that. I haven't figured out a solution for that yet. Is that okay? Yes. It looks okay. So that'll be... I can't really think of a solution for that. The only way I can think of to solve that... And then now you have even more expensive equipment on board that you're throwing away. Because you're not going to get it back. You pop the mains at 10,000 feet, the rocket's gone. You're never gonna fucking see it again. So the trick is balancing altitude with recoverability. That's one of the reasons why I made my level 2 rocket so big and heavy. I flew it to 5,000 feet, but it landed 100 feet away. No wind. And, big, heavy rocket with low wind. If the winds were high, I wouldn't fly it. Oh, God. So the trick would be to go out early in the morning. You're going to want to go out like 5 o'clock in the morning. And as soon as it's bright enough for you to get a decent video, punch it. When the winds are 0. So, assuming wherever you live is like that. Not every place is like that. But you're going to want to fly that when the winds are basically non-existent, so that you can have a chance of recovering it. There is another thing you could do. You could capture video. Like, say, for example, I want to capture video from a rocket going 15,000 feet up. Well, how much video do I need? I mean, I'm thinking 30 seconds worth of stabilized, nice, calm, under dual shoot parachute video would be perfectly adequate. So what I might do is I might deploy 2 small parachutes, put the rocket into recovery configuration, and then allow that to descend for 30 or 40 seconds, and then cut the chutes. So cut half the shroud lines for the chutes, release half the shroud lines, so that now the rocket is no longer under parachute. Let the rocket plummet, and then deploy the main chutes at altimeter altitude. This way, I would have a minimum amount of drift, because I'd only be under parachutes for 30 to 60 seconds. So I would get some decent video from high altitude, and then let the rocket plummet without the parachutes until you reach altimeter altitude, and then deploy the mains to get the rocket back. That could work. You'd basically need triple deploy. You'd need 3 deployment events. You would need an apogee deployment event, which would release your first set of parachutes at altitude. Then you would need a second deployment event, which would be based on a time, not an altitude, because if it caught a thermal, then you would never deploy. So say, 45-second countdown. After 45 seconds, release half the shroud lines of the parachutes, so now they're just streamers, and let the rocket plummet. And then your third event would be to fire your power charge and release your main parachutes at your 600 or 400 foot altitude, deployment altitude. So you would need 3 deployment events for that to work. Which should be possible. Yeah, that should be possible. If you used hopefully a really cheap flight computer, and a really cheap camera, something like this, and a 3D printed rocket, so that the rocket cost you very little. This way, if it didn't work, you don't lose very much. And once you know it works, then you put in the expensive camera, and try it again with the expensive camera. Because the key is, if I lose this camera, I don't care. This camera cost me $2. I'm not kidding. It was $2. Remember that section of the AliExpress app I was telling you about? Yeah, these knockoffs are $2. It's incredible. And you can even buy these on Amazon for right around $10. It's like 10 or 12 bucks. It's dirt cheap. If I lose this, I don't care. Well, I care, but it's not going to be a heartbreaking death stroke. Oh my God, there's my $300 Instago 360. My Instago 2. That would be devastating, because I could not replace that camera. If I lost my Instago 2, I couldn't replace it. I don't have the money. But I could replace this. So do a demo flight with this, and this way, at least I get some video if it works. See, the problem is if I do it without a camera, I just burn that expensive motor. How much is that motor? I bet you it's a lot. Actually, not too bad. $62. That's actually not so bad. So the test flight would cost me $62 in consumables, because the motor, once you burn it, that's it. It's done. So the motor would cost $62, and is that a 29 millimeter? Yes, it is. It's 29 millimeters, and it's 200 millimeters long. So I was right. That is a pretty long motor. So that motor, if I stuck it in here, would go to about here. So that's not too bad. Streaming it would be very expensive. Now, another rocket I want to build, and 3D printing is going to let me do this. Something I've always wanted to do. I want to take a whole mess of these little guys with the parachutes, and I mean a mess of them. Like at least 20. Preferably 30, but 20 would make me happy. I want to stuff 20 of these in a rocket and then spit them out. So I want to make a rocket that's only going to go, 600 to 800 feet up. Low altitude rocket. And then have that rocket, when the nose cone pops off, I want the entire front cargo bay to open up like the space shuttle. Just go like this. And open up like that. And just deploy 30 of these things out of that rocket. And let the kids run out and catch the little parachute guys. And they'd be cheap enough. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't use these here with the nylon parachutes. You can buy little parachute guys that have plastic parachutes. And I could probably fit 40 or 50 of those in a rocket. And then just let the kids keep them. If they catch them, they can keep them. And I think that would be a crap ton of fun. Oh, God. So that's definitely something I want to do. And I can get those cheap. I think... what was the price? I think I saw them as cheap as like $4 for 25 of them or something like that. They were seriously cheap. And so they didn't cost a lot at all. We're talking 10 cents a piece or 20 cents a piece or something like that. A little bit of work, because if I remember those correctly, the parachute does not come attached to the guy. You actually have to tie it to the guy. So that's, 40 of them you'd have to do that. Yeah, your kids would. It would be awesome. It's something I've always wanted to do. And maybe even attach a piece of candy to each one. A piece of tape with a piece of candy. So you get yourself a parachute guy and a piece of candy. Yeah, definitely. Definitely doing the piece of candy. The kids would love the piece of candy. But yeah, so the idea is I would 3D print a half tube and then 2 quarter tubes. And the 2 quarter tubes would be hinged to the half tube, and they would come together like this. And then the idea would be, when the ejection charge fires, some mechanism which I'll have to come up with would there would be a pin. So the two quarter tubes, so half tube, 2 quarter tubes, and the rubber bands on the quarter tubes going to the back of the half tube, and the rubber bands would make the cargo bay do this, and then whatever's inside would just spill out. Because actually ejecting that many parachute guys would be very hard to do without it clogging up somehow. It would actually be pretty hard. But if I can open up, like the space shuttle, have a cargo bay that just goes like that, then as the rocket's just shaking around on the parachute, these things would just fall out. They would just tumble out of the rocket. Yeah, that would work. That would definitely work. So the trick would be for this cargo bay to be rigid enough that when I put a single pin in here to hold it shut, that the rubber bands wouldn't cause other parts of it to bend and distort like this. So that it would stay properly shut, and so that the wind going over it as it's flying up wouldn't tear it open. And then what I would have is just a little pin in the clasp holding it closed. And when it would be sort of like this. So it would be kind of like this, except instead of deploying here, it would deploy here. So this part here would come out, and the parachute would come out, and then a string would be attached from this part of the rocket to the pin holding the cargo bay shut. So when this part of the rocket went BAM! It would yank that pin out and go exactly, the pin not on the nose cone, because then your ejection charge would have to go through your cargo bay. So it'd be down here. And a string attached to a little pin here, and then when it fired, it would just yank that pin out, and the whole thing would just splay open like this, and all the parachute guys would tumble out. That would be just amazing. It's something I've been wanting to do for years and years. I did it before with a few of them, like 6 or 7 of them, and it kind of worked. But what happens is when you start stuffing these guys inside of a rocket, you have this stack of these guys inside the rocket, and when the rocket fires, all of these guys compress down because of the G-forces of takeoff. And that makes them jam inside when it comes time to deploy them. So it kind of worked, but it was eh. But now with 3D printing, I can make a cargo bay that'll actually open up like this. And so there'll be nothing to restrain them, nothing to keep them from just sliding out. That's why it can't just be an opening. It has to actually open up. So that no matter how much they compress inside there, they'll just fall out. So think of it like this, where the bottom half of the tube would be one piece, and then the other half of the tube would be 2 pieces. So this part would be a door, and this part would be a door that would hinge open. Just like the space shuttle. Go look at the space shuttle when it's opened up in orbit. That's exactly what I would be doing. Well, how many would you be able to get in is the same answer as how high can you go. The answer is, how much money do you have? So the bigger the engine that I can put in the rocket, the more mass I can lift. And the more mass I can lift, the more guys I can put in. So my initial rocket would be designed, I'm going to design it around probably a 5-inch airframe. And the booster's going to be like a 3-inch airframe. But the cargo bay is going to be like a 5-inch airframe. And probably about that long for the cargo bay doors. And the one of my initial plan is I want to be able to fit 20 of these guys or 40 of the little plastic ones. So these expensive guys, I want to be able to fit 20 of these guys in there. But the little guys with the plastic parachutes, I want to be able to put 40 of those in there. So the idea would be to deploy 40 paratroopers. So you'd have 41, you know, because the rocket's going to have a parachute. So you'd have 41 parachutes in the air all at one time, and each paratrooper would be carrying a candy payload. I just think that would be so much fun. Man, that would be fun. Now the trick is you'd have to keep it low altitude. That's the hard part. The hard part is I got to keep this well under 1,000 feet. I'm talking I need to pop that chute right around 600 to 800 feet. Because if you go too high, all the little paratroopers are going to be off the field. So you've got to deploy low enough that people can get underneath it and catch them. And but yeah, I'd like to be able to get 40 of them in there. I mean, first flight would probably be a dozen. Maybe do a small scale one, something this size. You know, which is a lot cheaper to make and a lot cheaper to fly, and to fit a dozen of them in here, 10 or 12. I think 10 or 12 would fit in here. The trick is going to be making the cargo bay doors rigid enough, but light enough, so the rocket doesn't get crazy heavy. But yeah, so start off with a small scale rocket like this, with the idea of putting 10 or 12 of those little parachute guys in here, and then double the size of the rocket, and which would quadruple the interior space. No, 3 to 8 times the interior space. If I double the size of the rocket, I increase the interior space by 8 times. So I should be able to fit 40 guys in the bigger one. But start off small. So yeah, I'll start off with a small one that anybody can build and anybody can fly. And the idea is you put your little paratrooper guys in there. Yeah, I think it'd be a ton of fun. And plus room for the candy. I gotta make sure there's gotta be room for the candy. Because the candy is a must-have. Now that I've thought about it, it has to have candy. So each little paratrooper guy is going to have a little piece of tape and a piece of candy attaching him. So he's going to have a little piece of candy in there. So yeah, definitely have to have the candy now. Now that I've thought about it, it's mandatory. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see. Here we go. So for less than $6, yeah, about $6, I can get one of these. So for about $6, I can get this. Although I don't like this one because it has white parachutes. I don't like white parachutes. White parachutes are actually hard to see. Stop it. Stupid zoom function. So you can see you got these little guys. But here we go, these guys. This is too expensive, but what I want is these type. I want the, so here's 10 pieces for $366. But I want these guys with the colored parachutes, because the colored parachutes are going to be a whole lot easier to see when they're coming out of the sky. But that's the idea, to use little paratrooper guys like that. The problem with water balloons is mass. Actually, it's two problems. Mass and mass. Both problems are mass related. First, like I said, that cargo is going to want to compress when it fires. And so those water balloons are going to try to squish. And they'll either pop themselves or they'll burst out the airframe. The second problem is targeting. Hitting something would be really, really hard. Water balloons would be better for an RC airplane. So an RC airplane, you could strafe your target and then release the balloons as you pass. It'd be much, much better to do an RC airplane for water balloons. But a rocket would work perfectly fine for paratroopers. I'd prefer the non-military paratroopers, the ones just parachute guys, versus the ones with the guns. I mean, I'm totally okay with guns, but some people aren't. So to keep it as kid-friendly as possible, I'd want the non-gun paratroopers. Although the kids would probably enjoy the military guys more. The parents might not, but the kids would love it. But I'm blown away that fit perfect the first time. All I did was I measured how big the cube was. I made a cube that big with a little bit of tolerance, and then I gave it a radius, and it worked perfectly. 15/16 of an inch, and then just converted that to millimeters, which came out to 23.8. I think I just made it 24 millimeters, and then I applied a radius to the cube. That's simple. That's all it was. The only thing I did was I put a dot in the middle on the 3D model so that I get an idea of where the lens was. But that worked amazingly well. This could actually go, as you can see, I can embed that a little bit deeper. I'll have to see how much of the frame is rocket and how much is not. But I might actually be able to embed it a little bit deeper. I've got another maybe 4 millimeters. I could drop that in there. That actually wouldn't be that hard. Literally just shove it 4 millimeters in, chop more of this off. Yeah. This came out really nice. I'm really pleased how well this came out. So you need this shape so that the shroud lines from the parachutes don't snag and catch on things. And, I wish I could figure out a way to retain this using 3D printing without... see you later, Colin. You have a great day. I wish there was a way I could retain this without using rubber bands, using 3D printing. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Now, one way I could do it That's great. Oh man, is there any kind of documentary video on that? That would be awesome. There is one way I could do it. I just thought of this right now. If I, as you can see, this top is completely open. So this just comes right out. Okay. Now, if I had this so that I could insert it like this and then snap it into place, if there was a lip here that would hold the back of this camera like that, then I could just put a hole, a threaded hole here and an open hole here, and I could just take a 3D printed bolt and send it straight through here and just thread it in. And that would be enough to hold that rocket in, that camera in there, without me having to use a rubber band. And that would allow me to get rid of these things on the side too. Ooh, that is so potentially workable. Like, that is really, really close to being something I could do. I definitely will. That's awesome. Oh man, that's really close to being a workable idea. But I would need some way. I would need some way of capturing this back end here. I mean, theoretically, the bolt alone might be enough, but the right kind of force could cause the camera to pop out this way. It'd be unlikely, but not impossible. Oh man, that is so close to being a workable idea. I could just extend this a little bit before extend this a little bit before I have it angled down. This would give me the area to put the bolt, because there's plenty of area. There's plenty of area in front of this camera for that bolt to sit on front of that camera without blocking the lens. You wouldn't even see it. Damn it. Now I really want to do that. I'm going to spend all night trying to make that work. There is one other way I could do it. That actually might be easier. That might actually work. I wonder. I could put a threaded hole on each side of this, and then I could just 3D print a little cap that would just go like that and have 2 holes in it. And you'd put the cap on, and then you have 2 little tiny plastic screws, or use metal screws, and screw one in here and one in here. Or have a stub over here, so you only need 1 screw, but 2 screws would be better. And have 2 little screws to hold that cap in place, and that cap would capture the rocket. Or the camera. That could work. I could also do it with 1 screw, maybe. Yeah, I could do it with 1 screw. If I had a slot in here, a little slotted section, so that my plastic piece would slide into the slot and cover up half of the camera, and then a 1 screw here to hold it in place. That could work too. Yeah, that could work. And then I would just need a single screw right here to hold the cap in. Might be easier just to have it wrap around with 2 screws. Interesting. Because if I can avoid the rubber bands, I'd prefer to avoid. Rubber bands are easy, though. That's the one nice thing about rubber bands, is they're easy. And they're cheap. If you lose the cap or the screws on the field, you're screwed. But the rubber bands, you'll probably have a bag of them from the dollar store. You know, the little dental rubber bands. You'll probably have a bag of them. So rubber bands are easy. So maybe I'm overcomplicated. Maybe I just better keep it simple and stay with easy. Does this have a mount? No. I was wondering if this had a threaded mount. Because what would be really nice is if it had a 1/4 thread on the back here or something like that. And then I could just have a thumb screw on the inside. Like literally unscrew this and have a thumb screw on the inside. Just and secure the camera that way. Huh. I gotta think about that. Think about different ways to secure that. But that came out real nice. I'm really pleased with how clean that came out. This one's not as clean. It was just more of I could do vase mode. So that's why I did it kind of thing. But that one's not as clean. Although it's lighter. I think this actually is lighter. I gotta get my scale and weigh it. It's too heavy to weigh with my micro scale. My big scale's out in the car. What are you doing? Good. Yes. There's easier ways than trying to gimbal. So instead of trying to gimbal, just use a 360 camera. Then you can gimbal in software afterwards. Because one of the projects that I want to work on, we're this close to the technology being available. Insta360 almost has a camera that can do it. A consolation would be a dual 4K camera. Ideally would be dual 8K camera. But the trick is I need 120 frames per second. I really need 120 frames per second. A rocket flight is too fast for human perception. It's too quick. It doesn't last long enough. But if I had 120 frame per second video, I could play back that video at 30 frames per second, and that would quadruple the length of the flight. So, for example, well, actually, you know something? With the availability of motors like the H13, with the H13, with its 15-second bird time, 60 frames per second would be enough. Because 60 frames per second played at 30 frames per second means my 15-second liftoff will be a 30-second liftoff. And 30 seconds is enough to be enjoyable. And plus you'd have a little bit of coast. So I'd be getting pretty close to like 45 seconds of video, which would be quite good. I'd be okay with that. Even 50 seconds. If I had a 25-second until deployment, that would be 50 seconds at half speed. That would work. Yeah, that would work. So here's my plan. My plan is to take a relatively large rocket. Now, instead of putting the camera looking down like this, instead of doing that, I'd put the camera in the nose of the rocket like this. Okay? So the camera would slip right into the nose of the rocket. And that camera would be a 360 camera. So you'd be able to look up, down, left, right, anywhere you want. It'd be like you were standing right here on top of the nose cone. Okay? Now the idea would be to have a little railing here. So it'd be flat top. There'd be a little railing. And then here's the magic part. I would launch the rocket. I'd have the video. Once I have the video, that's it. The thing is done. You don't need nothing else. Now comes the fun part. You put on a pair of VR goggles and you play back the video at 30 frames per second. And now you'd be inside the rocket and you'd be able to look around. And the video would adjust because it's the 360 video. And then, and this means every video will be unique because, you know, the first person might look over here while the second person might look over here. So it would be a different user experience for each person. Now, the really cool part, okay, here's the cool part. I'd require them to hold on, you know, because the platform's going to shake. That's right. When you watch this video, you're going to be standing on a platform. And that platform is going to have transducers in it, which are going to make that platform shake. And it's going to shake, you know, from the rocket taking off. So you're going to actually feel like you're in the rocket. And you'll be holding onto that railing, and you'll be looking over over the railing at the ground as this rocket goes and takes off into the air in slow motion. And it'll be like you're standing on an actual rocket taking off into the air. Tell me that wouldn't be cool. Tell me that wouldn't be a badass experience. That would be so amazing. I want to do it so bad. The technology is almost there. Well, it probably already is here. I just can't afford it. So when I say the technology is here, I mean the technology I can afford is almost here. You wouldn't even need telemetry, although that could add some nice stuff like, you know, altitude readout and stuff like that, speed readout. Have those in the AR video, the augmented video. I think that would just be so amazing. That'd be a hell of an experience. Yeah. That would be fun. That would be neat. I can even have a seat, like a cockpit seat with a control panel, and I can overlay the telemetry data that you're talking about. That shouldn't be that hard to do, to overlay telemetry data into the video. Yeah, that shouldn't be that hard. It'd be a lot of encoding work, but you don't have to do it once because the playback will be the same. So you don't have to. It's not like you'd have to do it in real time. Even if it took the computer a couple days to process the video, that's fine. Once you have the video, that's it. You're good. You got the video. It'd be amazing. Even without the transducers, it'd be a pretty cool effect. But with the transducers, that would be really neat. Now, the best way to do it, which I could never afford, but the best way to do it would be no goggles. The best way to do it would be a spacesuit, like a hard shell spacesuit. We would open up the spacesuit. You would step into the spacesuit. Except when you step into the spacesuit, the helmet would be a big screen. It would be a wraparound flexible screen or a projection. Projection might be easier. But the wraparound helmet would be a projection. And that's what the transducers are for. You wouldn't need motion, really. What you would need is just vibration. Just the transducers to make it vibrate. Because the rocket's basically going straight up. But what would be really cool is if you could you'd step into a spacesuit and it would close around you, and then the helmet would be a screen, and it'd be you, the astronaut, standing on top of the rocket. That'd be amazing. Wanna go for a ride? Anybody get that reference? Let's see if any of you nerds get that reference. Why build one when you could build two for twice the cost? I love that scene. That was good. But yeah, that would be amazing. I would really like to do that. Do they have a video player for VR goggles where you can it'll just play the video, but you can move around in the 360 video, change your view? Does that? I never actually checked. I assumed that existed, but I don't know if it actually does. Like, can I just feed a 360 video to a VR headset, and would it do that? Would it let me look around in the 360 video? I don't know. I've never tried. Well, I couldn't use YouTube because I'd be out in the field. There would be no data connection. I'll have to look into that, see if there's any. You can make apps for the VR headsets, so that should be possible. I mean, it would have to be for the Oculus 2, since that's what I have. Interesting, though. I gotta think about that. Very, very interesting. Now, if you really wanted to go crazy with it, you'd have a okay. The boy, that gives me ideas. What is this? Go away. Nope, that's not what I want. No survey. Okay. The Yeah, I tried to use silk filament for a rocket. It just doesn't work. The here's one I tried to make, and I have to keep re-gluing this joint because if I tighten this too tight, it splits the joint, and I have to glue it. It's because the silk doesn't stick to itself. Probably the only way I'm going to be able to get that cool silk effect is to fake it. So print an actual vase mode single wall, tube, and then slide that tube over top of a paper tube. So it would just be a paper rocket with a plastic skin. I've been, the lack of adhesion is a big problem. What I'm surprised is that nobody's made a co-extrusion PETG. It's like, come on, Polymaker and all these other companies. I want a co-extrusion PETG. One I could actually use to make a rocket. And we need the 29mm. Print that, please. There's my 24mm. Whoop. Man, that would be cool. You could also, it would also be interesting to create VR tours of different places using like drones and RC airplanes. Mount a 360 camera to a drone or RC plane. You fly a particular circuit, and then when you play back the video, let the person sit on an office chair that can spin. And so they'd be sitting on top of the airplane, and they could just look around in whatever direction they want to look while the airplane's flying the loop. This will all be on playback, of course. I'm really surprised no one's done this. Now, I've been talking about it for 10 years, and still no one has done it. So maybe I'll still get a chance to be the first one. But the trick is you need the 360 video. Because the 360 video is what allows it to be... If you're just playing back a video, you can just do that on YouTube. The whole magic of this would be the 360 video, because that allows the person in the playback to look at whatever they want to look at. So that's why the 360 aspect is so important. Because then it's a unique experience for even two people watching at the same time would be seeing something completely different, because they'd be looking at different places. I was thinking the first one I could do would be like a little tour of my town. Just... something like that, it would just be fun. Are you sticking? You look like you're sticking. So, yeah, so my latest craze, little SQ11. If you go onto these Chinese sites, eBay or Amazon or Alibaba or AliExpress, and just do a search for SQ11, you'll find these little tiny cameras. They're basically 1-inch square cubes. But all kinds of neat things you can do with this. The video is not great. It's not the greatest video in the world, but it is a usable video. Actually, I want to look at the video and see if it's usable. Make sure I can see the fins in the bottom. Yeah. I'm not going to scan. Just give me the video. Thank you. That's the wrong video. Might just be a thumbnail. Oh man, it's off the screen. It must be over on the second display. Yep. Oh yeah, that works. I can see down the length of the rocket. I can see the two fins. I could probably get away with angling that a little bit more. Why isn't it playing? 3 megabytes, it's a video. Yeah, that works.
That's the end of the rocket.
You lose about 20% of the frame to the rocket body, but I'm okay with that.
Rocket.
But you can see down the length, and you can see the fins, and you can see the so you'll be able to see the motor firing. So that's good. So that means that this angle is acceptable. I might want to see if I can shave away more of this, get rid of more of this here, make that flush, flat, straight. I can get rid of another millimeter of that, and that'd be easy to do. And okay. What I really need to do is to make this section a little bit bigger and this section a little bit smaller, but I don't want to make this bigger because I've already got all these parts designed, and that would be, it's using existing parts, while if I made this bigger, that would be unique to that. And I don't want to make this smaller because I'm running into the limit of the plastics getting too close to the hot bits. So that's a really optimal size right there. Maybe a tiny bit smaller. But no, that video looked pretty good, so I think I'm gonna, call it good enough and leave it alone. I could probably actually angle the camera out just a tiny bit more. Another 2 degrees would probably be enough. But I kind of like how nice that is. That just sits really nicely there, and I don't want to mess with that. Definitely makes it heavier using the 16 ribs all around. Definitely is heavier. But not horribly so. I might beef up the boat tail a little bit, put 16 ribs in the boat tail, and that's mostly because that's the part that's going to hit the ground every time it comes down. No, actually no. This is coming down sideways, so that won't be a problem. Okay. Okay. That works. Now the question is, do I want to make a different rocket for each camera, or do I want to unify and have the just add a different mount for each camera? I can see the merits of both. Designing a separate rocket for each camera would be easier for me, but unifying the design would probably increase sales because buying one rocket would get them multiple platforms for cameras, so it would probably sell better. It would just be a bit more work. But it is doable. Interesting. Okay. I will have to think about it. I kind of like this filament. It's not the gold I was hoping it would be. It's more of a it's more of what I would call a champagne. That's actually a pretty good representation right there. The gold gives it a champagne kind of look. Although not going to be easy to see this in the air. I'm probably going to want to print a nose cone in a different color just to have a little contrast there. It's also a little loose. I'm going to want to fatten that up a little bit. Even my little fat band right there wasn't quite enough to give me a snug fit. It's still a little bit on the loose side. Okay. I like it. So that one is going to be minted. I don't see any issues with that. I've already flown the airframe, so I know the airframe works. So I don't have to fly it again. But on September 9th, I'll fly that at the ARS launch. So that will fly, and I'll also fly this one for people who like the little beefy rocket like that. People who like that kind of rocket. Plus, with a rocket like this, you could print more segments, make it bigger if you want. It'd be a lot easier to do. Stay. Good boy. Let's see. Anything new on the AliExpress front? They did have some new things that were pretty cool. I can't easily do this. No, I can't do it at all. The keyboard's over there. I can do it on here, though. Oh, I could just look at my previous order. Okay, hang on. Oh, stop doing that. Oh, we gotta sign in. My orders. Got that. Got that one. And that one. Alright, let me show you guys this now. Let me check, see if you guys have said anything to me. Hey Joe, how you doing? And no problem, CAD Prince. Let's see. I try not to bug you guys too much there. I try to only post there when it's something that's really good. Because I don't want to inundate you guys with messages. You know, if you want to see every deal I find, I post them to my Facebook and my Twitter. But when I post to my Patreon, I try to make sure it's something special. That it's something that I think you guys might really like. So here we go. Let's look at this stuff. So here's some of the neat stuff that I've gotten on AliExpress lately. I found this. It's a big camera, so this can't go in a small rocket. But this is a camera that claims... uh-oh, I don't like the fact that the page can't be found for something I paid for. That's kind of scary. Why isn't that available anymore? But anyway, it's a pretty beefy camera, about that big. But it's got dual 4K lenses. It's got a wide-angle lens and a narrow lens. That's kind of cool. So for 19 bucks is $18.26 after coupons and tax. I figured try that out and see if it's any good. It's not 4K. It says it's interpolated, but I'm hoping it's at least 1080p. I'd be totally okay with 1080p. If you need socks, these are still available. You can get this 10-pack. You need to be size 10 or smaller. If you're above size 10, these are probably not going to be comfortable. But if you're below size 10, these should be okay. They're little ankle socks, but 10 pair for $2. So I've got my sister, Michelle, has a lifetime supply of socks now. These, I got a few of them in. They're good, so I'm ordering more. This is sanding foam board, foam pad sanding things. What do you call them? Sanding blocks, but they're soft foam. You get 60 through 320. I wish it had one more. I wish it had 400, but that's okay. 320 is still pretty fine. This is the little camera I'm getting. It's a fake. It's not 1080p. It's 640 by 480. But, you know, it's halfway decent 640 by 480 video. Low light, forget it. But outdoors in bright sunlight, it's actually halfway decent video. For $2, I'm not complaining. 19-inch wiper blades. I got a bunch of cheap 22-inch wiper blades, but I need 19 inches for the other side. So I've been ordering these. This is pretty neat. You know those USB cables I've been getting that have the power meter built into them? Well, this turns any USB cable into or any USB-C cable into a power meter cable. So you plug this in, and then you plug your cable in, and it tells you how much power is being transferred over the connection, which is pretty cool. I have gotten some of these in, and they are wonderful. So they are absolutely worth the price. I wish I can get different lengths, but at the $1.99 price, you don't get different choices for length. But this is a 60 centimeter bungee cord with clips on the end. I only ordered a couple at first to see what kind of quality it was. I was afraid this might be a rubber cord, but it actually is a nylon braided sleeved cord. Probably rubber inside, but it's sleeved. So this is a decent little bungee, so I've been grabbing those. Great for strapping stuff to your backpack, strapping stuff to your roof rack on a car. Like Michelle's her walker, I strap it to the roof of the car, and it works out perfectly. I want to build my own launch controller, so I've been grabbing a couple of these. These are waterproof connections. So these are little pigtails. You just get the pigtails, and it's a waterproof. It's an automotive style waterproof connection. So good for outdoor. Why did you open? There's no reason for that. This is pretty neat. I've been snatching a couple of these. This is the USB cable with the power meter built in, except this one, you can get it in micro USB. So this is available in micro, C, and A. So I got the micro one. I've never seen the power cables for micro before, which is pretty cool. The cowhide leather work gloves, these are legitimate. They actually are rawhide leather, and they actually fit my big giant hands, which means they'll fit your hands. But yeah, $2 for work gloves. Hell yes, I grab those. Some Kapton tape. I got a couple of things I gotta fix, and I need Kapton tape for that, so I grabbed a little roll of Kapton. More gloves, more camera, more wiper. I think. Oh, they had this. It's a little Bluetooth mouse keypad combo. I was like, for $2, why not? It'd be nice to use with this little tablet. This is a power meter for USB. It probably doesn't do PD because, you know, it's price. But for your smaller devices, you get volts, amps, milliamps, total power transferred, amperage. Of course, you multiply these two, you get watts. Basically, it's a multimeter for your USB connections. I was like, for $2, yeah, I'm gonna grab one. And this is nice too. It's one of those extendable cups. So those little cups you can toss in your glove box, your backpack, and it turns it into a cup. How big is it? 250 milliliters to OZ. 8 ounces. Good. Okay. So they had the larger ones, which I thought 250 was about 800 or about 8 ounces. So that's a little 8-ounce collapsible cup. I thought that was kind of cool. And what else we got here? I got this little solar light string for $2. I'll play with it and see if it's any good. I got a couple more USB cables. I thought this was cute just because it was an astronaut. It's a little counter-rotating, asymmetrical helicopter dude. And I was like, you know something? That's just cool looking. I was like, I want that. It's a little astronaut dude. I was like, for $5, I'm not going to buy it. But for $1.99, yeah, I'll take one. And here's another solar garden light thing. Again, for $2, I live in a place that's ideal for solar powered gadgets. I thought that was pretty neat. But that's just some of the crap I found on AliExpress. Yeah, Tinkercad is surprisingly powerful. It's easier for me when I'm manipulating objects. And with Tinkercad, you're manipulating objects. So, figuring out how to make it do what I want to do is relatively easy to me. I would pay. Can you trust that minefield? What do you mean? The Chinese say, yeah, it's totally trustworthy. If the seller doesn't ship the order within a certain number of days, AliExpress cancels the order and refunds your money. Which is kind of annoying because sometimes I lose out on things that I want. But yeah, AliExpress is pretty good about. Temu is also pretty good about it. About the customer experience. Now, you do get crap sometimes. Like that freaking smartwatch I got is truly garbage. I don't even know how to make it turn on reliably. But most of the stuff, you know it's garbage when you order it. Like, for example, I had no illusions. I knew with absolute certainty that this was a fake when I ordered it. The question is, how bad a fake and how good was it? But here's the thing. I paid $2 for it. So for $2, I get a 1-inch cubed camera that actually does work and that records 640 by 480 video at 30 frames per second. And it's actually halfway decent video. Does it look great? Does it look HD? No. But it was $2 and I'm stuffing it on top of a bomb. I'm sticking it on top of a rocket, a missile. Okay? I'm okay with that. But I went in eyes open. I understood it was probably a fake. Now, I wish I can get these working. I haven't gotten these working right yet, but these would be great printer monitor cameras. They don't work at night at all. You need some illumination. Because it's fake IR in there. There's no IR in there. I wish the electronics for this was in this. Because this one, you have to press and hold power, and you have to wait for the light to light up. There you go. Then you let go. And now you press power again. It's going to blink. Okay, now it's recording. The problem is, you have no way of knowing it's recording. You have to pay attention during that process. Now, when you press power again, the light's going to come back on. That doesn't mean recording. That means standby. That means it's ready to record. You press power again. It blinks to indicate, okay, I'm recording. But now, in order to be a spy camera, it stops blinking so that nobody knows this is actually recording anything. And the problem is, I want to know. And then to turn it off, you press and hold, and eventually it blinks. There it goes. Now it's off. I wish I can get the light to stay blinking. I want it to keep blinking. So that, you know, when I'm prepping my rocket, I can look up and go, yep, it's blinking, we're good. Go ahead and fly the rocket. Because if it were to stop recording, I wouldn't know. This one has an interesting feature where if you press the power button, it turns on and begins recording all automatically. I think I do have an AliExpress link down below, so if you use that, I'd appreciate it. I should earn a commission. I've never gotten any money from AliExpress, so either nobody's ever used it or they're not paying me. But I do have an affiliate link for them. This one, you press the power button, just press it. It turns on and it begins recording automatically. So it's a single button operation. And for rocketry, that's fantastic. The problem is this camera is quite a bit bigger than this camera. And that board actually does take up that space. I actually have one of the circuit boards. Oh, it's behind the computer. Now, theoretically, the camera is on a ribbon cable. So if I extract the camera from this, I can rotate the camera 90 degrees so it's looking down. But that comes with a separate problem, which now the buttons are hard to push. So, not sure if that's going to be a good rocket camera or not. But this would be great for monitoring printers. Because theoretically, it can connect to Wi-Fi and you can add it to an app. But I have not gotten to work yet. I can connect to the camera, I can assign it to my Wi-Fi, but then after that I never connect to it again. So I don't know if I'm configuring the Wi-Fi wrong, I'm not sure. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, CAD. But this one works perfectly fine. I have no issues with this, and that form factor is very ideal for rocketry. I mean, you can stick several of these on a rocket if you really want to. But this is very ideal for rocketry. I wish they would make a fake. Like, okay, you're gonna fake it, so get rid of all the fake stuff. Like, for example, these infrared LEDs, they're all fake. They don't work. They're not even LEDs. They're just pieces of plastic. So get rid of them. Just make me a little cube camera that works, that doesn't have all the fake stuff. Just don't try to be a fake. Be your own camera. And people will pay for it if it works. You know, tell me it's 640 by 480. Spend the extra half a cent and give me D1. I would love it if you can make this true D1. So that's DVD resolution, 720 by 480. It's just an extra 80 pixels in width for the sensor. But Temu is good for decorative stuff, houseware stuff. So if you want things like, flags for your yard kind of stuff, that kind, and this is stuff I got off Vine, but you can get the same kind of stuff off of Temu. If you want stuff like yard flags and lights and decorations for your house and metal signs like, where's my hummingbird signs? I just had them. You want stuff like this, these metal tin signs that have nice designs on. If you want that kind of stuff, I found that Temu is great for that kind of stuff. Earrings, pins, pins. You can go crazy with pins. You pins for everything. I got this adorable little cat bus pin. I got this adorable little cat with a cowboy hat pin. You can get just adorable stuff like that. Just bring up Temu. You'll see what I mean. It's largely that kind of stuff. Always check both sites, AliExpress and Temu. Sometimes you get a better deal on Temu. Sometimes you get a better deal on AliExpress. If you are a person of small stature, if you are a Chinese-sized person, wonderful for clothing. You'll find all kinds of really cool clothing very cheap. I saw all kinds of things on there that I would kill to have, but they don't make anything in my size. And once you get past size large, you basically need to double. So if you wear a 4X, you need an 8X. And even that might not fit. So the sizing there is very, very different than the sizing here. Yeah, it's once you get past large, forget, and anything below large, you need to order at least 1 or 2 sizes above it. So if you're a medium, you need to order an XL. It all depends on your body makeup. If you're a real skinny as rails person, like a Chinese person, like your typical Chinese person you see, if you're a real skinny, short person, then you could probably order pretty close to what you get normally, or 1 size larger. But most people are going to need to 2 size up. So if you're small, you need to order a large. If you're a large, you need to order a 2X. Are you a big boy like me? But it's too bad. They have a lot of those full print shirts where it's a printed graphic on a polyester shirt, but instead of being a design in the middle of the shirt, it covers the entire shirt. They have a lot of really cool stuff on there, but nothing I could ever wear. Even if I lost weight, I would not be able to fit anything on that they order from there. But Temu is good for stuff like that. Home decorations, outside decorations, pins, clothes, necklaces, fake jewelry, garden flags, stuff like that. At least in my experience, that's what they seem to be more focused on. While AliExpress is more focused on, electronics, gadgets. Oh, there it is. Here's the guts from this camera. And as you can see, they use the entire circumference, so it's pretty big. For example, for shoes, Asian people simply do not have feet as big as mine. No, I'm aware of that. Most of these devices will only connect to 2.4 gigahertz. I actually had to get rid of my mesh wireless router because it did that auto-assign 2.45, which does not work. I have 2 separate WANs, one for 2.4 and one for 5.0. Yes, I'm aware of that. But yeah, for whatever reason, it just, as soon as I connect it to the Wi-Fi, I can't connect to it anymore. I don't know why. It's probably something I'm doing, and I just haven't sat down to figure it out. Because it has enough of the functionality there that I don't think it's fake. I think it actually should work. I can direct connect to the cameras fine, but then it's annoying because you can't be that far away. If I can connect to the Wi-Fi, then I will be able to put them all over the house. But these would be great for watching 3D printers, just because they're so tiny and so cheap. If we can get them working. But for rocketry, this is nice. I do want to take one apart and see. Do I have a screwdriver handy? Yes, I do. I do want to see just how much wiggle room I have inside here. I think there's only a single screw holding this together. Oh my god, that is a tiny screw. That's not going to work. Do I have my little screwdriver kit here? Yes, I do. Another $2 off of AliExpress. The handle is plastic. If I remember right, yeah. The handle is plastic, but it's more than good enough for this kind of stuff. It does have a little a magnet in the tip for holding the bits, but it's perfect for this kind of stuff where you're just not going to put a lot of stress on it. So a little micro screwdriver kit for $2. Oh yeah, I'll take that. Okay, so that comes apart there, and I think it just comes apart. Or does it? Okay. The screw doesn't appear to have done anything. Does it just pull apart? Like, is it clipped? Like, what's that screw in the middle for? Because it looks like it comes apart the other way. Yeah, it does come apart the other way. Okay. So it just comes apart in two shells. Okay. There's the buttons. Okay. Boy, that really gets pretty tiny when you... It's a... You're right. It literally is just a screw that's there for no reason. Huh. Now, the only thing I don't like about this camera is it uses a micro B connection. So it uses that oddball USB connection that no one ever uses. Yeah, it's literally a fake screw that does nothing. Like, why? Oh, no, it isn't fake. It's actually holding the two halves together. It isn't fake. See? It's actually, that's what actually holds the two halves together. Okay. I'm okay with that. Now the question is, can I get rid of... Yeah, there's two screws. Oh, there's screws holding that together too. Nice. Okay, where's my screwdriver? Because these IR emitters are fake. So if I can get rid of them, I can make the whole thing a little lighter. The question is that what's holding the camera in place? Or can I just get rid of that altogether? Because I would love to make this lighter. So there's the front face, and there's the fake, literally, it's just a piece of plastic. The fake infrared emitters. Oh, nice. Woo. Oh man, that really is tiny. There's the actual camera. So that's all I actually need is that part right there. And the question is, can I put this back together without the BS? So, yes, the camera actually does slot in. That's wrong. Where does the USB connection go? USB connection goes up. Buttons go this way. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. How does that work? Oh, it does need... It needs that. It needs the fake bit. But I can never make a case this light. I could never ever make a case this light. So the only reason this makes sense is if I were to the only way this would make sense is if I were to use it without a case altogether. The problem is I don't think I could print a usable case that would be lighter than the case it comes with. The best I could probably do is cut out all this crap and just reuse this frame. So snip out all this junk in the middle here. But even just getting rid of the fake bit probably would make it a hair lighter. Let's try it. Let's see how much that. But yeah, getting rid of that crap would help a little bit. I mean, maybe I could eventually make a case that would work, but I don't know if it's worth it. For such a cheap, low-resolution camera, the weight savings just isn't there. As in, I just don't think it's worth the effort. Because it would be a pretty monumental effort to design a case better than what's already there. Okay, let's see how that works. That goes like that. Okay. Now this, I think it goes this way. That goes like that. And this goes like this. Why is that not sitting correctly? Okay, there we go. I think I got it. And then this holds the case together. Let's see if this still works. Yes, that still goes in. I don't think I quite got that together right. There it goes. Okay. Now, does it still turn on? Oh, I got the buttons backwards. Okay, still works. Does it still fit? Yep. I put the buttons backwards, but that's okay. So that still fits. Now, did I make it any lighter by any appreciable amount? Whoop. There's my scale. Okay. So I got my itty bitty scale here. Look how tiny the scale is. It's so cute. Let's see. Power. Yeah, it did. I took off 0.6 grams. So now it's 9.7 grams instead of 10.3 grams. So that little bit, how much does that weigh? 0.4 grams. So I took off 0.4 grams. Because that weighs 0.4 grams. Very interesting. I am going to want to reverse those buttons because that's going to get annoying, the buttons being reversed. The thing is, I don't think I could do a better job designing a shell to hold this than the shell it comes with. Well, let's find out. I got to reverse those buttons anyway. Getting these to separate is kind of a pain. There it goes. Okay. So, the shell plus the buttons weighs 2.87 grams. A spiderweb shell would actually weigh more. I don't know if I can make a shell 3 grams or lighter. And the only benefit to me would be that it would be slightly shorter. Because this could be like 3 millimeters smaller. And there's nothing to gain by doing that. Yeah, I can't think of a benefit. Yeah, there's no benefit. There's no upside to spending, the next several weeks designing, printing, and testing cases just to end up with the same damn thing that I already have. That just doesn't make any sense. Okay. The good news is this is serviceable. I can replace that battery, but as long as I can acquire these cameras for that price, there's no reason to replace the batteries. It would literally be cheaper to... Well, the button's gone. It's history. It's gone. It'll never be seen again in the light of day. It is absolutely gone. Because I'm not going to go down there and find it. Yeah, the buttons are gone. Okay. I can still get to them. It'd be a pain in the butt, but they're still accessible. Not enough. That would save me maybe a gram. And there is no rocket flight that I could make where that gram would be worth it. I'd rather have the structural integrity of the shell. Yeah, the buttons are now history. They will never be found again. So now I'm going to have to use something like this to press the buttons. Yeah, it's the left button. Record. Stop recording. Press and hold. Off. Okay. So there's really not much you can do to lighten that. Now there might be reasons to remove the shell. I could see there being reasons for that. For example, I could put this in a very, very tiny rocket if I disassemble it. So here's how I would do that. The advantage of taking this apart for an ultra micro rocket, and I mean an ultra micro rocket, is that I could whittle this down to something this size. The SD card's actually in the way. Interesting. Because now I can get rid of all this, and the battery can now sit alongside the camera like this. What am I hitting? Oh. So now the battery could be glued in place like this, giving me a tall, skinny configuration like this. And then I could glue a itty bitty little mirror onto that lens right there. Glue a little tiny mirror onto that lens to allow that camera to look down. That would give me a very, very compact configuration for a micro rocket. Like, I could put that in a 13mm rocket. In fact, maybe I could. Let's see, where's that tube? There it is right here. This is an 18mm tube, and it almost fits. This would definitely fit in a 24mm tube. So I should have a piece of 24mm right there, actually. There is a piece of 24mm tube. And this bad mamma jamma would fit right inside of a 24mm tube. So I could have an itty bitty payload bay with a 24mm tube, and then have the camera sitting inside that 24mm tube. And I could actually blow the ejection gases past the camera if I did it right, and just have a little hole where the camera sticks out on the side and a little periscope mirror. It would need to be a first surface mirror, but put a little tiny mirror right in front of that lens, angled down, so that I could get my down looking video. And I could make this rocket, but in where this is 24mm and this is like 13mm or 18mm. And I can make an itty bitty little payload rocket that would have that camera on board. That would actually be kind of cool, especially for small field flying. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So that might give me another project to work on. I could 3D print the transition using a 0.2mm nozzle. I could 3D print the nose cone using a 0.2mm nozzle. I could even use an 18mm tube so that you could fly it on 18mm or 13mm motors. But kind of the point is to fly it on 13mm motors. So I would want to scale it down. I could then 3D print some fins or make some balsa wood fins. I got plenty of balsa wood. Use the laser cutter or a 3D print a jig for cutting out some fins. But I can make a really lightweight video rocket that would fly on like A10s and even stage it. So A10-0 to A10-3T. That would be a lot of fun. I'm going to do that. Yep, I'm going to do that. Now, I might also be able to print a sled to mount the camera into. Now, the only bad part is the buttons are on the bottom. So, activating the buttons is going to be really hard. See, this is the kind of thing where I wish those buttons weren't surface mounted. But I wonder if I can desolder those buttons, turn them 90 degrees and resolder them again. So turn them around 180 this way and 90 degrees up so that the contacts would still be in the right spot. And resolder those buttons so that they're facing out. Then I could just have two little holes in the tube, and you would just take a screwdriver and just go poke, poke, and press the buttons to turn the camera on. But yeah, that would be a seriously, seriously tiny little camera rocket kit. where you could put this entire camera, and it just barely pokes out the side right there, just like that. Oh, that's perfect. Oh, that is nice. Now what? Now this is where I might be able to 3D print a case for this camera. That would make sense. 3D print a case to put this camera in this way, like that, and have it conformal to the inside shape of the rocket body there. I might even be able to put a hole in the side for the USB cable to be able to stick the USB cable in there. Where's that SD card? Does that SD card stay firmly in there? Yes, it does. That is a good mount. A little dab of hot glue to make sure the SD card doesn't move. Ideally, I would want to turn those buttons facing up. This would work so much better if I can make those buttons face up. Now that camera looks like it has a ribbon cable. Is that? It is a ribbon cable. It's attached by a piece of foam. Look at this. Look. Which means I can separate it. Oh, this is going to be so easy to destroy. If I do this wrong, it's going to ruin it. But if I do this right, I don't need the mirror. Oh my God, this is going to work. It does! It's on a ribbon cable! Oh! So I could mount this camera outside the rocket. Oh, that is so cool. Look at that. Now, the only bad thing is that video is rotated 90 degrees, but that's actually okay. Because we're doing a vertical down orientation, that doesn't actually matter that much. Because this is right side up. And I'm going to have it mounted this way. So that's going to be up. The only bad part is I don't think you could turn off the timestamp on these. Oh my God. And mounting it this way also means I don't have to desolder the buttons. All I got to do is have a hole on the side here to poke the buttons with from the side. Oh my, this is going to be fun. Okay, you're gonna get a kick out of this. I can show this to you to a small extent. Hang on. So, if I were to put a little hole right here. Yeah, cheap definitely does help. You don't cry as much when you break it. Okay, I need that hole to be a little bit bigger, actually. That's actually big enough for the lens, but not for the whole camera. I need a knife to go bigger than that. And I don't think I have a knife handy in here. I took all my tools out of they're all in the car still from when I did my trip. Hey, my hard drive reader. for my PATA and SATA drives. Where's the USB connection? Huh? Oh, no, this converts from PATA to SATA. That's right. And no knife in there. What about this one? My little spitting dragon. I love that little one. No knife. Oh, there's another box. Is it in this box? No, but my Dremel is. Okay. Is that big enough? I think it is. Especially when they're cheap enough that you don't cry when you break them. Those are the best kinds. Okay, so I need to arrange it like that. Oh! It tried to run away. And now it's all turned. I got all that debris in here. That's a little bit better. The trick will be to 3D print a sled to fit in here to make this a whole lot easier to do. And also to make it more reliable. There it is. Oh yeah, there's enough room in there. So, as you can see, it's only taking up about half the tube. See? So if I were to 3D print a sled to go around that, it would protect it from the ejection charge. And then the camera would stick out the bottom like that. That's the only part that would stick out the side. And then I could 3D print a little tiny shroud that you'd glue on here to, make that more aerodynamic and also make sure things don't hit that, because that'll break it. Oh, absolutely, I could 3D print this. Oh, that would be so freaking cool. And then I would have to put little tiny holes in the side here so I could poke the buttons, and I have to make sure I can see the LED. But absolutely, this would work, and it would only have to stick out about that far. That's just cool. How heavy is this? Just this. I know it can't weigh that much. I'm going to say 8. 6 grams. An entire video camera at 6 grams. Oh my god, that's 6 grams. Wow. That is so incredibly light. And I wonder if there's a way to get that to fit even smaller, because there's plenty of room in that 24mm tube. There's no way I can make the board smaller. That's as small as it's going to get. But I think we're far away from an 18. This is an 18, and we are... I mean, if I squish the 18, I can get it in there. So I could do an 18 if I squish it. So I could squish the 18mm tube, and it would fit in there. And here's the cool thing. That basically turns the 18mm tube into an oval. And I can 3D print an oval nose cone. So I could put this in an 18mm tube if I squish it. And again, the camera would just stick out the side a little bit. So I'd put a slot in here to allow the camera to stick out the side. And I would have 2 little holes. Matter of fact, the buttons would be, they might be pressable without extensions. You can see here the buttons are right up against the edge of the tube. Now, can the battery fit? Yes, the battery does fit. Okay, so there's the battery. And then the camera. Ooh, I don't get access to the USB port. That's a problem. The battery's not the battery is smaller than the circuit board, so it wouldn't help making a smaller battery. I would need some way of accessing that USB port. I did not think of that. This needs to be able to come out. You have to have some way of taking it out in order to recharge it and download it. I mean, physically it would fit. I mean, we're good to go size-wise. See? It fits in there. You know, if I make it an oval. But I need some way of accessing... that would be way too much mass. Way too much mass. The only way that could work is if I... and I am not capable of doing this, is to remove the USB connection and replace it with little wires, and have those wires plug into a pigtail outside the rocket. Yeah, I did not think of that. I need a way of accessing that USB port. So that means two things have to change. First, I need the battery on this end. By moving the battery to this end of the model, I now have an exposed USB and SD card slot. Which means if I have this sitting right at the top of a tube, yeah, that's how it has to be. It has to be this way. Okay. I have to install it this way. If I install it this way, this works. Let me show you. So if I put the battery in this way and the camera in this way, I'm going to hide the camera inside for now, just for the purpose of this discussion. But now I can have a nose cone that fits over top of this tube, and now I have access to the USB port and the SD card slot. So I definitely need to do it that way. What I might have to do is custom make an entire nose cone made around this exact size that I need. There we go. So I think going to 18 millimeters, pushing it too far. I think I should just stick with the 24 millimeter. And again, same deal. This would slide in like this. The camera module would pop out the hole here. Okay. So that would be your configuration right there. You'd have a shroud to protect the camera, of course. The camera would sit there like that. And then when I opened it up inside here, you can see I would have access to the USB port and the SD card slot right there. So that would give me the access that I need. Okay. To simplify construction, just have yeah, to simplify things, I would make this part of the cargo bay nose cone, so no ejection gases would have to get past that, because it really doesn't take up that much space. In fact, I might be able to stack it. I might be able to have the battery on top of the camera. So if I get rid of this little piece of foam here, I could probably leave this whole entire stack like this. Glue that stack together like that. Yes, it fits. Yep, that's the way to go. Definitely the way to go right there. But this way, this section only has to be this big. It only has to be that big. I can 3D print that. It would even be okay if it was a little heavier, because now we're going for size, not mass. If I have to add a little extra mass, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. At this scale, it really doesn't matter. Okay. And also, by 3D printing it, I should be able to design little holes for you to stick a toothpick in to press the buttons. And then as long as you used a clear plastic, you'd be, let's see, where's the LED? Wrong button. Must be this button. Okay, so there's the LED. I would just have to make sure I have a hole where I can see that LED. And the other good news is I don't need access to this button. I never have to press that button. I don't even know what it does. Probably switches between pictures and video. But yeah, this whole thing will very nicely fit inside of a 24mm tube. Like, comfortably. Meaning what I would probably do is the little tiny section of body tube the camera has to sit in, and the nose cone would be 3D printed. And it would just fit on top of this. Now, I would not deploy this as a nose cone. I would probably still deploy down here so that I can deploy this separately in some way. Yeah, something like that. I'll figure something out, but this definitely will work. This it won't just work. This will work well. Okay. Yeah, this is going to work very, very well. Getting the camera to come out the hole is a bit of a pain in the butt. Doesn't want to come out. There it goes. Got it. There you go. There's your configuration right there, but I would 3D print that. If I did it right, I can make it like a clamshell that would just really fit nicely on there. I could actually have this be the shoulder of the nose cone, so I can make a sled that would fit inside this 24mm tube, and then have the nose cone fit on the top half. Oh, that's cool. I need to make this. Oh man, I need to make this now. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Alrighty, guys. I'm going to call it for today. I am definitely going to start working on this, because that's not even that much work as far as taking apart the camera. Meaning that's something I can give instructions for people to follow, and they would have a reasonable chance of success. So yes, I will absolutely be working on this, because I only need a section this big. That's all the camera takes, that much space. Oh, that is so cool. This is going to be fun. And then that will give me, because remember, this is going to be cut off right here, so I'll have access to the USB port, I'll have access to the SD card. I'll have to figure out how to get access to the button, but that's another reason to use a USB sled, because then I can just put a hole where I need it to be to access the button. And yeah, this is going to be cool. So, and it's going to be light. Alrighty. I will see you guys later. You guys have a great day. See you all next week.